One of the questions I often get asked is, what about chasing yield? Don't I need to chase yield? Don't I need to make sure that I get my yield as high as possible on a property so that I can cover my expenses and therefore my serviceability is great and then I can keep buying? Because isn't the ability to service really essential to buying property? And otherwise banks might start turning me down if I get say 2 or 3 properties and I can't keep buying. And to a certain extent that's true, but that's where I think it's really important to come back to looking at the goals of your portfolio and what you're actually trying to achieve. Now, I've always said that when you're in wealth building mode, the most important thing to do is to chase capital growth. So ultimately, I would love to take all of our clients and buy 50 hectares on the outskirts, just outside the metropolitan limit of Auckland, and wait for the Auckland metropolitan urban limit to extend, and all of a sudden you get a massive step change in value, and that's how you're going to get the absolute best possible capital gain, and you're going to have a massive uplift in value, and all of a sudden you're going to achieve your goals. But we can't all afford to do that. So therefore we've got to make each property that we purchase affordable, and so that's where yield is really important. So yes, yield is important, but only to the extent that it's affordable. Otherwise what happens is if we're always chasing yield or making yield our number one priority, we run the risk of buying property that may not be great in relation to its ability to help us achieve our goals. So I'll say that again. If all we do is chase property that has the greatest possible yield, we may risk buying property that has a rubbish capital growth profile and may not get us, or certainly won't if it's got a crap capital growth profile, and won't allow us to achieve the wealth that we need that will allow us to have the passive income that we need. So, for example, some people say let's chase yield, so let's go down to Tokoroa and we can get cheap properties and they've got, say, a 6 or 7% yield. Well, that's true, but then let's think about the true yield. So on residential, we talk about yield in terms of gross yield, so the rent in a year as a percentage of the value of the property. And in a place like Tokoroa, the challenge you have is that you're often up against long vacancies or significant repairs and maintenance bills. So actually your net yield may not be as good as, say, an Auckland property where your vacancy is almost nil and often you have very minimal repairs and maintenance. But the most important issue is that what is Tokoroa going to do in terms of capital growth over time? And that's where it's really important to look at the economic story. So you could go and buy 5 properties in Tokoroa worth $1 million and as a deposit, and that's great. But where are you going to be in 10 years' time? Where will the value of those Tokoroa property be in 10 years' time versus property in Hamilton or Tauranga or Auckland or some other areas that have got a much better economic growth story? So if you are looking to build wealth, to build passive income, then you've got to chase capital growth as your number one priority. It's not to say that yield isn't important, because yield is really important in order to keep going. So what will happen is that yes, you might be able to, with chasing yield, you might be able to buy a couple more properties, but then you could be stuck longer term because those properties don't go up in value, and then where's your next deposit going to be from? It's going to only be able to be from savings. Go and chase capital growth property, as much land as you can get, and in areas that are forecast to boom.